Welcome back, everybody. Skanking it in a UK style today. When will things get better? Down Empire Road. Tune called Empire Road by a band called Matumbi, based out of London, UK. Was actually the theme tune to a television show with a predominantly multicultural cast, and lyrics summing up the experiences of individuals of West Indian, Jamaican descent growing up in the UK as expatriate West Indians with a different set of challenges, different set of experiences than their countrymen back home. And lyrics such as, you've got to give thanks for a multiracial community down Empire Road, for that is the way Father wants it to be. Off the album Seven Seals by Matumbi, released 1978 on EMI's Harvest imprint. The story of the UK immigrants began in the 1950s into the 1960s. This is going to be a very general introduction to the reggae experience in Britain, the expansion of reggae into Britain, which became the second most important outlet for reggae, source of reggae in the world, and very general overview only. I feel a bit foolish as a Canadian who's never even been to the UK attempting a video of this, but I'm going to keep it very broad, very general. Some of these topics I may delve into in more detail. There's certainly many ones worthy of a closer examination. What was called the Windrush generation really established the presence of Jamaicans and West Indians in the UK as they left the islands of their home to find a better life, better economic opportunities in England, which had been the colonial overlord of many of the Caribbean islands, including Jamaica. Settled in London in centers like Birmingham, whose Handsworth area would become a huge Jamaican community, huge source of reggae, and in other urban centers. 1954, a man called Duke Vin arrived from Jamaica and established the first Jamaican sound system in the UK. Duke Vin had been a pioneer of the sound system world in Jamaica, where he had been the selector, or the man who plays the records on the sound systems, for Tom the Great Sebastian, who was one of the pioneer sound systems in Jamaica. So that established the sound system culture in the UK, which proliferated throughout the decades to come and still continues today with long-running sounds with their followings. And it would continue to inform the reggae as it did in Jamaica, inform and have a symbiotic relationship with what appeared on record would be the sound system's contribution to the UK reggae culture, often kind of an unsung story, behind the scenes story, little known, but definitely a huge part of the reggae world, both in Jamaica and the UK. As these Jamaican communities grew in the UK, the demand for music from home grew. Labels like Blue Beat began to appear in the UK to release records made in Jamaica in London, in the UK, where there was a market for sounds from home that reminded them of home as they adjusted to harsh climate, unfamiliar conditions. Often racial prejudice would be an issue as they assimilated into UK culture. This is a tune called Be Still by Derek Morgan, ska, early 60s ska. You can see the UK stamp, somebody stuck on the label there. Blue Beat, very iconic label. The name actually became synonymous with music from Jamaica, which was then in a very R&B based early ska mode. Eventually, Chris Blackwell would set up Island Records in the UK as another outlet for Jamaican product to be released in the UK, which it would continue to be. Eventually, the technical difficulties. Eventually, Chris Blackwell began moving Island Records more into the rock arena and spun off the Jamaican product into the Trojan label, which became very iconic in the late 60s, early 70s. They would release a series of compilations called Tighten Up, which ran to several volumes. This is the first one, appearing on the iconic Trojan label. Now, as labels like Island and Trojan began releasing Jamaican music in the UK, this began inevitably with the cross-cultural interactions. This began being discovered by individuals of non-West Indian, non-Jamaican descent. White UK people began checking out the music. The Tighten Up, the Trojan releases in particular found favor with a group of a youth underclass called the Skinheads, who were working class youths who favored a certain style of dress, close cropped hair, and gravitated to Jamaican music, black music, not to be confused with any sort of racist connotation. Sometimes alternatively called boss reggae. This early skinheads would favor sort of punchy instrumentals, which became increasingly popular in the UK, the late 60s, early 1970s. But reggae, Jamaican music, still very much a niche market at this point. As the 1970s dawned, The Harder They Come movie put reggae more firmly on a path to international success, with artists like Jimmy Cliff and others being groomed for a higher level of stardom, which somewhat came to pass. But it would be the arrival of Bob Marley and the Wailers, connection with the UK-based Island Records in the early 1970s, that would really put reggae on a path to a greater commercial success and a huger international profile, as it really crossed over to a outside of the traditional reggae audience in the West Indian communities. There soon began to be a proliferation of self-contained bands in the Bob Marley and the Wailers mold, which was a crucial difference between UK reggae and Jamaican reggae, whereas Jamaican reggae depended on was heavily producer-driven, with music laid down by a kind of floating pool of session musicians, sort of organized into bands according to whatever producer they worked for. The actual self-contained band in kind of the rock sense was more of an anomaly, but became more the norm in the UK than it did in Jamaica. The first self-contained reggae band formed in the UK was called the Cimarrons, who came together around 1967, late 1960s. These early UK bands would be formed to back up visiting Jamaican artists in concert. The Cimarrons would continue through the 1970s into the 1980s. This is their LP called Maka from late 1978, green vinyl on the Polydor label. As reggae crossed over to a bigger international audience, the bigger labels started to jump on it. Labels like Virgin started releasing a slew of reggae, also became hugely popular with the punk crowd, with high-profile champions like The Clash, John Lydon from the Sex Pistols, all champion reggae. The Clash, of course, notably covering several reggae songs, and artists like the Two-Tone Acts, the Specials, and so on, incorporating even older styles of reggae, which were out of date in the Jamaican community, like ska, bringing that up to date and merging it with the emerging punk ethos of the time, of the late 1970s. You had groups like UB40, which embraced a multiracial ethic and put out very credible records on their own. After Bob Marley, UB40 would go on to become the biggest selling reggae act in the world, though sometimes derided for not being authentic enough, which was something of a challenge UK reggae always faced, somehow seen as second rate to that coming from Jamaica. There were even producers who would go to some lengths to disguise their productions as being from England and try to make it look more Jamaican, when in fact the UK reggae was as diverse, as complex, as original as anything coming from Jamaica, if not more so. An English friend of mine who grew up in those days is firmly of the conviction UK reggae was superior in many aspects to that coming from Jamaica. After the Cimarrons, there were bands like Aswad, which arose out of London. Aswad, crucial album from them, self-titled, appeared in 1976 on the Island label. This was the high water mark of roots reggae, coinciding with these great UK reggae bands. 1976 saw increasing clashes between the West Indian community and particularly police over issues of racism, of police harassment. They had what was called the sus laws, where any individual could be picked up on suspicion of having committed a crime. This led to riots at the Notting Hill Carnival in 1976, and also racial tensions and riots in ensuing years. Further UK reggae band arising out of London, the Regulars, also known as the Reggae Regular. This is their album on CBS, another big name label jumping on the reggae bandwagon. 1979 featured their hit Where Is Jah, which was also be used to kick off the Greensleeves label in the UK, which would become hugely influential in the late 70s, 1980s, crossing over from the roots into the early dancehall period. Another London-based band, Black Slate, would release a string of very credible reggae albums, roots reggae albums. Capital Letters, also affiliated with the Greensleeves label. Headline News, there it is there. The iconic Greensleeves label, very early release on here. Capital Letters, Grell 7, only the 7th LP released on the Greensleeves label, 1979. High water mark of roots reggae. Of course, there were also other communities outside of London, other Jamaican communities that put out very vibrant reggae scenes. One of the most notable was Birmingham's Handsworth area, which gave rise to the great Steel Pulse, one of the premier UK reggae groups, who put out the seminal Handsworth Revolution as their debut. Steel Pulse, crucial reggae album, probably top 10, certainly top 3 for UK reggae. Island's Mango imprint, that is from 1979, I believe. 1978, possibly, 1978. Handsworth Revolution, must-have UK reggae album. Another crucial reggae act was Misty and Roots, put out a series of LPs. They were very committed to a communal, collective vibe, didn't want to be associated with any major labels. Their Misty Live at the Counter Eurovision is a very acclaimed live album. There's also Misty Over Sweden, which I've never heard, it's supposed to be as good. But they would self-release their own music on their People Unite album, rather than sign with a major label. Black Symbol also emerged out of the regional UK scene. This was released through the Bristol Reggae Archive label, which was affiliated with Bristol Archive, a label that put out some very nice reggae reissues several years ago, covering in some depth the rich Bristol reggae scene, which Black Roots also arose out of, their debut album. Black Roots from the Bristol reggae scene, reissue on Bristol Archive Records from a couple of years ago. Merging a uniquely British style that emerged in the mid-1970s, starting around 1975, was lovers rock. This is a topic I may go into in some more detail in a later video. It was kind of kicked off with a song called Caught You in a Lie by a young singer called Louisa Marks and appearing on the Safari imprint. This was produced by UK soundman Lloyd Coxon of the Sir Coxon Sound and featured members of Matumbi playing the music. And lovers rock, the subgenre, kind of kicked off with a blend of sweet soul, that kind of Philly soul sound, very romantic lyrics, often sung by females, especially very young females in their teens, which was a demographic not really covered very well, not really serviced very well by reggae as a whole, which tended to be very male-dominated at this time. Louisa Marks' huge hit, Caught You in a Lie, kind of kicked off that subgenre, as was continued with groups like Brown Sugar, again, very female-focused. Brown Sugar would merge lovers rock with kind of roots-oriented reggae lyrics to cover both markets, both demographics. And the lovers rock genre, as tough, bass lines and tough rhythm tracks as any Roots song. Just more romantic leaning lyrics, more accessible maybe to the female audience, better suited to dancing than hard Roots chanting down Babylon and that kind of thing. Carol Thompson, another lovers rock superstar. The group Matumbi, by the way, would also feature Dennis Bovell, who would become a dub and production wonderkind of his own and put out many albums under his own name. As a dub mixer, as producer, he's kind of an unsung innovator of Jamaican music, of reggae music in the UK. Certainly worthy of a look in his own department. In 1981, the Babylon movie came out, celebrating that UK sound system culture and featuring Brinsley Ford, lead singer of Aswad, in a central acting role, and a crucial soundtrack, including Aswad's brutal instrumental Warrior Charge, as rootsy as anything coming from Jamaica, featuring horns by Vin Gordon. But as the 1980s kicked off, Bob Marley passed away in the early 1980s. Jamaica began to move away from the strictly roots sound. Jamaica, or UK, in some aspects followed suit. There was kind of a schism in genres, in styles. Some UK sounds, like Saxon, followed more the dance hall sound of coming from Jamaica, but with a uniquely British spin on it. Many of these artists had a very unique sound, informed by their environment, by where they had grown up, slightly different from reggae coming from Jamaica. A finely tuned ear can hear the difference. But the roots tradition would be carried on by the great sound man Josh Shaka. Roots and dub would carry on through the 1980s and forward to today, keeping those styles current and active on the UK scene when they kind of fell out of favor in Jamaica itself. And Josh Shaka and others would revive that roots sound with some alterations. Became known as steppers in some quarters. The Fashion Records label would carry lovers rock and the dance hall sounds, with the DJs carrying the swing through the 1980s. Great British MCs as a compilation of the DJs or rappers on the iconic Fashion Records label, founded by Chris Lane. Great tracks like Smiley Culture, known for the fast chat, which was unique to the UK dance hall scene. Philip Levy's crucial Me God Me King. Many great tracks on here by UK-based artists, as well as those two production houses, production camps. Adrian Sherwood would rise with his On You Sound label, and a variety of artists under that umbrella. Going on from a link where he had started out distributing records, began producing, started out with a link with Prince Farai, the great Jamaican chanter, and expanding into his Creation Rebel bands, Dub Syndicate, African Head Charge, many other groups, many other acts associated with his On You Sound label, merging reggae with more eccentric, experimental sounds, industrial, post-punk, creating a unique synthesis of different elements, not strictly reggae. Also, Neil Fraser, Mad Professor, who had started around the late 1970s in his Ariwa studios, put out a flood of product through the 1980s, again concentrating on lovers rock, roots, dub, all with his unique kind of eccentric production style. Here's just one example. Put out a long-running series called Dub Me Crazy. This is The Adventures of a Dub Sampler. Dub Me Crazy Part 7. Neil Fraser, eating the master tapes. So the UK scene continues on to today with a variety of styles, a variety of artists, some unique to that scene, that culture. It's continued to inform and have a symbiotic relationship with the reggae coming from the home country ever since. Very deep, very complex. What I've shown today is just the tip of the iceberg. very broad subject of UK reggae. As I said, I hope to go into some of these topics in further detail in later videos. This is just an introduction only, but I hope it's been of value to you guys. So cheers and thanks for watching.